Elected in 2019, he won the seat from Dennis Skinner, the Conservative MP for Bolsover, Mark Fletcher.
I've always struggled with aggressive men and sort of male culture, macho culture, because it's, to me, if it goes to a certain edge, if there's a certain level of conflict, which to others might just be banter, to me, I'm 10 years old and scared again in my head.
Another 2019 Conservative MP, it's the member for Darlington, Peter Gibson.
I'm a gay man, and the thought of being subjected to some treatment that would change me is just utterly crackers. It cannot be done.
All that after your news headlines.
Good evening, I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The Home Secretary says Rwanda is ready to receive migrants and she hopes to start deportation flights by the summer. Suella Braverman has continued her visit to Rwanda, where earlier today she met with students from Kepler, a non-profit university programme where at least 25% of its students are refugees. Ms Braverman also attended a street fair which was organised to celebrate Commonwealth Day. The UK and Rwanda are vowing to step up efforts to tackle migration. The agreement between the two countries has been expanded to include all illegal migrants and not just asylum seekers.
Progress is being made rapidly, and I'm really confident on the back of the progress that I've seen here in Kigali that we will be able to operationalise this world-leading agreement very, very soon. The big point here is that there will be a package of high-quality humanitarian support for people who will be relocated to Rwanda. That, combined with our robust new laws, will enable us to break the business model of the people smuggling gangs.
Well, the deal with Rwanda has cost £140 million, which Shadow Levelling Up Secretary Lisa Nandy says could have been better spent.
We think you should take that money, put it into the National Crime Agency, create a cross-border cell that disrupts the criminal gangs and send the clearest possible message to those criminal gangs that their behaviour won't be tolerated and that will bring them to account should they persist. Instead, we've had more and more of the tough talk from this government, and last year the boat crossings hit a record high of 45,000. It's not working, and it's about time the government recognised that.
Former Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng has accepted he and Liz Truss made mistakes with their mini-budget last autumn, which triggered market turmoil. In a GB News exclusive interview, he says the current Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, has done a good job of stabilising the economy.
I think Jeremy, rightly perhaps, has adopted a cautious approach given what happened last winter. And he's also very much, I think, looking at the markets, looking at what Treasury officials are doing and trying to do it in a methodical way. And that's where I think I and Liz got it wrong.
Boris Johnson will publish evidence in his defence over allegations he misled Parliament on the PartyGate scandal. He's expected to submit a dossier to the Commons Privileges Committee tomorrow before being questioned by MPs on Wednesday. The investigation is being chaired by Labour's Harriet Harman, but the panel has a Conservative majority. Cabinet Minister Oliver Dowden believes the former Prime Minister will provide compelling evidence.
Having worked with Boris for many years in different capacities, I'm quite sure that he will put forward a very robust defence of his case when he appears before the committee on Wednesday. Ultimately, this is a procedure of the House of Commons, and it's always been the case in these sort of things. It's up to individual members to make up their own minds. So first of all, it will be for the committee to make a determination, and if that necessitates it going to the floor of the House, it will be up to each individual MP to make up their mind.
Vladimir Putin's made a surprise visit to the Ukrainian city of Mariupol, according to Russian state media. It's believed to be his first visit to a newly occupied Ukrainian territory since the start of the war. The port city in Donetsk was destroyed by one of the most violent sieges of the conflict. TV, online and DAB plus radio. This is GB News. More news at the top of the hour. Dan Jarvis, Labour MP for Barnsley Central,
I've been trying to get a sit down with you for ages, so thank you for finally succumbing. You are unusual. You were an officer in the British Army. You served in Northern Ireland, in Kosovo, in Sierra Leone, in Iraq and Afghanistan. Why on earth are you now a Labour MP?
Well, I believe in public service. I also believe in the importance of the team, of getting difficult things done by working with others. That was the ethos of my time in the army, getting difficult things done. It's the same in politics. You have to work with other people. And the basic essence of being a member of an MP for the Labour Party is that you believe in the collective. You believe that by working together, you can achieve more than you can working alone. So I know many people were very surprised that I left the parachute regiment and became a Labour MP. But for me, the golden thread that runs through it all is public service, is doing something important to make a difference to other people.
And we're going to talk for most of this interview about what it is like to serve our country. First of all, I just want to ask you about what it's like being a single parent, because tragedy struck your family in 2010 and suddenly you're a single parent.
I think being a single parent is the hardest job in the world. When previously there were two of you doing all of the jobs, all of the things that have to be done every single day, and then all of a sudden it's just you. And that daily routine, getting the kids ready for school in the morning, getting them up, giving them breakfast, getting the school uniform, doing the school run, it is epic when you're on your own. So that's hard. And of course, there's no resilience or insurance policy within the household. If previously, if one of you had been unwell, the other one could kind of sort of take the strain. But if it's just you, it's all on you. So it's an incredibly difficult job. There are amazing single parents around the country who are coping and doing the very best that they can. But, I have to confess, it was hard going.
Okay, so let's talk about your journey. You leave comprehensive school, but you attend Sandhurst for your training, for your officer training. Sandhurst is famously filled mostly by people who went to private school. Is that a problem that most people at Sandhurst went to private school and are not from your background?
Well, I think things are a bit better now, but certainly when I went there, I felt very out of place. I remember walking up through the doors of this incredibly grand building, and my comprehensive school that I'd been to was a good school, but it didn't prepare me to go to a place like Sandhurst. And I was surrounded by people who were more confident than I was because of the nature of their public school background. I remember being told that the suit that I'd bought, which I thought was a very smart suit from Marks and Spencer's, if I can say that, I was told very early on that it just wasn't good enough, it wasn't smart enough, and I needed to go and get another suit, and that my shoes weren't the right sort of shoes. And you're stood in a corridor when you get there with other people who, they've got very expensive pinstripe suits and really posh sort of tweed jackets, and you kind of look around and you think, well, is this a place for me? And is this somewhere that I can be successful in? But I think in a funny way, that only made me more determined to do the very best that I could. So I think it was a bit of a sink or swim moment. You either kind of make the best of it and get on with it, or you kind of walk away and leave it behind. And my philosophy was get your head down, work hard and make a success of it. And that's what I tried to do.
And I was reading about some of the training practices at Sandhurst, and you write about something called milling, which I had never heard of, which I was reading open-mouthed. Just explain what happens.
Well, milling comes a bit later. So milling is something that is unique to the parachute regiment.
Okay.
It's basically boxing, where you are pitted against somebody else and you basically have to box with them, but in a very aggressive and violent way for a period of time. So it's not pleasant, but it is designed to test your mettle, because if you're joining the parachute regiment, if you're going to be going into the most difficult and challenging situations, the army needs to know that you've got the mettle to cope with those kind of situations. So it's not a nice thing to do. It's pretty unpleasant, and it's a hard thing to do, but it is an important part of the training.
So you and another, kick the insert word out of each other.
Yeah. Pretty much. And basically that's designed to test whether if you get knocked down, and I did get knocked down on occasions, are you going to get back up? And that is a good test of your determination. As I say, it is not pretty, and some people would not be especially approving of it as a training technique. But if you're going to be in the paras, the system needs to know that you can cope with that violence and that pressure. So that's why we did it, and that's why it's done to this day.
Wow. This is what you said about Iraq. You said that it's impossible not to conclude that it was a grave error. Now, you have a debate in Parliament. Tell me what that debate in Parliament is designed to achieve.
Well, my debate in Parliament isn't to debate the rights and wrongs of the war. It's absolutely legitimate that people have a view about whether it was the right thing or the wrong thing. But the purpose of my debate solely is to commemorate the service and the sacrifice of those very brave men and women who stepped forward in good faith to serve in our armed forces and didn't come back. So this 20th anniversary milestone, I think, provides an important opportunity to commemorate them and their service, to ensure that they are not forgotten. And as I say, regardless of the rights or wrongs of the conflict, I think it is very important that we don't lose sight of the fact that British servicemen and women behaved and conducted themselves with extraordinary professionalism under very difficult circumstances. And my debate will seek to ensure that that is remembered.
Do you have an idea or a picture in your mind about how we might remember?
Well, I think it's just important that we don't forget about the service and the sacrifice. This will be a difficult moment for the families. They will still be grieving their loved ones. And whilst I completely understand why some people want to take the opportunity to get into the detail of whether it was the right thing or whether it was the wrong thing, I understand all of that. But what I want to do is just make sure that collectively in Parliament, on a cross-party basis, we come together and say, regardless of the rights or the wrongs of that particular conflict, we will ensure that we never forget the service and the sacrifice of those who laid down their lives.
When you were in Afghanistan, having read your book, I think this is the most difficult situation that you found yourself in throughout your years of service. There was a moment where you feared that you were going to be captured by the Taliban. And you momentarily wondered if you would shoot yourself rather than be taken captive. Just saying that is quite chilling, actually. Talk me through that. What was going through your mind?
The deployment to Afghanistan was extraordinarily difficult for lots of different reasons. And there were many moments of profound uncertainty and doubt. There was doubt in my mind about whether I should have even been there in the first place. And on a daily basis, you were grappling with the challenge of trying to keep your soldiers alive. That's primarily what I was there to do, to keep my soldiers alive. And throughout the duration of the deployment, there were many difficult and challenging moments. The one you refer to in particular was a moment where I found myself alone in the desert, in the dark. And having been there for a number of months, I knew that I was worn down and fatigued by the whole process of having to make these difficult judgments every single day. And the burden of being the boss, when you're in command of your company, it's all on you. You have to make the decisions, and they are life and death decisions that you're taking every day. And I just remember a moment of profound difficulty where all of a sudden I was on my own. I'd got split up from the rest of my company in the dark. And I just had this moment where I thought, well, there is a real risk that I could get captured. I'm not going to get captured, because being captured by the Taliban is not something that you wanted to happen. So your tired, addled mind is going through all the different scenarios, the sort of what if this happens, what if that happens? And in that moment, I just made this judgment that I was somehow going to find a way to make sure that I wasn't captured. And that was a very, very difficult moment, which I've thought about many times subsequently. But I think it just exemplifies the sort of the difficulties and the pressures that people are put under those very difficult circumstances.
Terrifying to listen to that. I just want to clarify, just because you said something and I just want to put on the record, because I think you'll thank me for it, you said, I even questioned whether I should be there. That was not because of the nature of the operation, wasn't it? That was just because, obviously, it's difficult for anybody to leave their families.
Yes. That's absolutely right. So it wasn't about the importance of the mission in itself, which I think was the right thing to do. It's just that I was there at what was a very challenging time for myself and my family, and I was constantly racked with doubt about whether I should be in Afghanistan with my company and my soldiers, or whether I should have been at home with my family.
OK, let's talk a little bit about politics. I don't think you would contest me saying that Labour has a problem, has had a problem with its connection with working class voters. Somebody with your background, I mean, surely you could be the answer. And let me tell you, when you first got selected as a candidate in Barnsley, and in the tea rooms, like me and my colleague would say, oh my gosh, have you seen, we've got like some former army officer that is going to be a Labour MP. I mean, he's got to be the next leader. Would you ever contemplate it, Dan, leading your party?
Well, let me firstly just pick up on your important point about the connection to working class voters. I mean, throughout its history, the Labour Party has had this challenge of being able to talk to people in Hampstead, whilst at the same time being able to talk to people in Hull. Now, I'm extremely proud to be a Yorkshire MP and to be the MP for Barnsley Central. So you can probably guess where I sit in terms of the kind of the Hampstead versus the Hull debate. And I think whilst things are going pretty well for us, you know, we're in a good position in the polls, nobody's remotely complacent about the challenge that the Labour Party still faces to cross the line and to get into government. And an incredibly important part of that is being able to talk to voters and firstly listen and then talk to voters in what sometimes people refer to as the red wall seats. And I think that we always need to make sure that as a party, nobody can ever say or think that we are a party of people who live in London. And I live in South Yorkshire. I'm very proud to live in Barnsley. And my perspective on politics on the world is through the prism of my constituents and my constituency. So I try and make sure that I'm their voice in Parliament, but also their voice in terms of an important debate about the Labour Party and developing a policy agenda that speaks to the challenges that working people face, not just in my part of the world, but right around the country. So I'm not remotely complacent about the sort of the challenge we face, but we need to make sure that in the months and the sort of the years to come, that people in Hull, as well as people in Hampstead, look at us as the people who've got the analysis and understand the challenges of their daily lives and are best placed to serve them in government.
Would you ever rule out leading your party one day?
Well, it's not something that I give a huge amount of thought to. I mean, I'm very fortunate in the sense that as well as having life experience outside of politics, I was also for 4 years, somewhat eccentrically, because many people in my party didn't want me to do it, I was the mayor of South Yorkshire. Now, that's given me a bit of a taste of what it's like to be in government. And it's not easy. There are all sorts of challenges and frictions that you encounter every day. So not for one moment do I underestimate the challenges of being in the leadership role and being in government. But I actually think that we've got an exceptional leader in Keir Starmer. Look at the journey and look at the transformation. Do you know what it was like back in 2019?
All right.
We've come a long way, and he's done a fantastic job in getting us to where we are now.
That's the first time we heard Dan the politician. But what I loved so much about that is, Dan, you have the most extraordinary life story. And I'm incredibly grateful, actually, that you have shared it with us. Dan Jarvis, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Gloria.
Coming up, Conservative MP Mark Fletcher.
You also need to recognise the things that aren't good in your life, the things that you struggle with, because so often they're the things that actually empower you. They're the things that actually make you want to make a difference.
Coming up, Conservative MP Peter Gibson.
I call it abuse, basically trying to tell gay people, convert gay people from being gay into being heterosexual.
We We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Mark Fletcher, I've wanted to do this interview with you for a long time, so pleased that you are sitting here with me today. You were elected as a Conservative MP for Bolsover. You beat Dennis Skinner. I want to talk to you about growing up, because you grew up in a household where you were subject to and witness to domestic abuse. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I mean, I had a brilliant mum. She was my best friend. She was amazing. She was sort of 5'2" and Scottish and had a very fiery temper. But unfortunately, my mum sort of married another guy when I was sort of around 7, something like that. And he was not a great guy. He was someone who I think he really resented mine and my mum's close relationship. I think he really resented me, sort of looking back. But there were a lot of things that at the time felt normal, but actually really weren't. So he used to sort of take me for drives, which my mum thought was a nice thing, you know, sort of father-son bonding time kind of thing. But actually, he just hit me in the car. And, you know, there were similar things sort of throughout. He used to sort of spy on me in the house and stuff. It was very strange. And then it sort of exploded. My mum found out he was having an affair. I think I was 11 years old. And he confronted her And I remember sort of him he beat her up downstairs. I was sort of upstairs trying to do my geography coursework, or homework rather, and he came upstairs. I can't quite repeat what the words he used because they're not broadcastable, but he said, "This is all your fault, you little," and insert word, which I didn't know what the word meant at the time. But it's one of those things where my mum was amazingly strong, but she didn't cope with that period at all well because she was very proud. She'd been a financial advisor in a very male world in the 80s and 90s. She was very strong-willed, and I think she felt very unempowered. And for me, I ended up... she had a bit of a breakdown, is the honest thing, and she didn't want to press charges. And I was looking after my mum. I wasn't at school. I was trying to look after her.
Are you an only child, Mark?
I am an only child. Well, I'm either an only child or the oldest of 5, depending how you want to see it. My dad has remarried and they've got 4 kids. But in that household, I was an only child. And so I missed a lot of school in year 7. In the end, I ended up in hospital because my digestive system gave up. A lot of my body sort of gave up. But I don't know. I do a talk for year 9s usually in my schools, and I always say you're taught when you're that age to focus on everything that you're good at, everything, if you're bright, if you're good at sports, if you're good at music. But you also need to recognise the things that aren't good in your life, the things that you struggle with, because so often they're the things that actually empower you. They're the things that actually make you want to make a difference. And I'm a bit of a zealot for my job. I'm a bit of a crusader. And I use the example of what happened with my stepdad because, I never expected to talk about it. And I talked about it in the House of Commons, and we helped to get children recognised as victims in the domestic abuse bill, which I'm really proud of. But I use that as an example to kids who might not be in the best position themselves and thinking maybe I can go and change the world in some way as well.
Did you tell anyone at the time?
No, I didn't. I mean, my godparents, who are amazing, they knew, but I think they were the only people that knew otherwise. My dad didn't know for years. I never told my dad, which I regret in lots of ways, but I'm also glad because I think my dad would have probably acted as a northern man would act. But yeah, no, I didn't tell anyone.
You said in that speech, which you made, it was the first speech you made after your election, you said that these are experiences which shape you. To quote you, let me say that it casts a lifelong shadow on those children who are affected. Can you tell me how?
Because I think you grow up and try and understand the world. You're always learning. I mean, to some extent, I'm 37 now and I'm still learning about how the world works, and it's different worlds that I'm in now in Westminster. But I think you look for what's normal, and when something like that happens, it's not normal. But going for a drive and getting beaten up was normal. I've talked a lot actually about how I've always struggled with aggressive men and sort of male culture, macho culture, because it's, to me, if it goes to a certain edge, if there's a certain level of conflict, which to others might just be banter, to me, I'm 10 years old and scared again in my head, because that's what I associate it with. That's what I associate strong men with. And that's a really difficult thing. And actually, perhaps it's good that I sort of recognise it, but it's one of those things that you don't escape.
How did you escape the situation? What happened? How did this man leave your life and your mum's life?
Well, after the night I just mentioned, there was, I think, 12 months of sort of legal arguments. My mum and my stepdad were business partners, but there were lots of sort of disputes and bits and pieces. But I never saw him after that night. I've never spoken to him since that night. And, that I'm actually quite relieved about. So in a sense, it ended at the moment of greatest tension. But it wasn't something that, I've never been keen to find him again. Weirdly, I got a letter at my new house, which is however many houses along, a couple of months ago, asking if I knew where he was, because an old company were looking for him. And it was the first time anyone had referenced him by name in however many years. It was very strange.
More from Mark Fletcher after the break.
I think part of it is that I couldn't protect my mum. I think, you feel as a man that you want to be able to do something.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
You talked about shame as well as terror. I didn't get the shame thing. Explain that to me.
Because I think part of it is that I couldn't protect my mum. I think, you feel as a man that you want to be able to do something. I think there's a shame in, I think most victims would recognise an element of shame, of like being other and almost feeling guilty for that, of almost feeling guilty about talking about it in a sense, because you just want to sort of get on with your life now. I'm very happy with my life now, but you have this sort of echo of the past that comes up every now and then, sometimes in a positive way. I was with. I did an amazing thing. I went out to see the Royal Marines in Norway a few weeks ago, and it was what you would expect to be a hyper male culture, and actually was anything but. It was one of the most tolerant places. I actually was quite emotional about how amazing it was to be surrounded by so many men who actually were, the very best of Britain. But the other side of that is sometimes you just feel like you wish it hadn't happened to you. You wish it wasn't you that had had it.
The issue of domestic abuse should not be seen as a women's issue, and men must speak out. That's your words. There's not that much evidence of this, is there? I mean, you are in a minority.
Yeah, and it's an interesting, and there are some slightly difficult conversations to have. I think when you speak to veterans charities, when you speak to domestic abuse charities, they will often recognise that sometimes women use allegations of domestic abuse against men to give themselves an advantage, and equally, you get a situation in which a lot of men are terrified to talk about it, and that it's not just sort of women on men, it's same-sex relationships as well. I get a little bit distressed when we morph sort of violence against women and girls and domestic abuse, because I think they are actually different things. There's obviously a huge overlap, and I'm not sort of naive, but I think it's really important that male victims don't feel like they're othered, and that they don't have a place to sort of talk about it. And it is, you're right, there's not a lot of, percentage-wise, in terms of recorded crimes, there aren't that many of them, but B, there aren't very many people who speak up about it. And I think that makes it more difficult.
And you've sort of alluded to, if you don't like this phrase, then correct it, toxic masculinity. Is there any government policy that can do anything about that?
No, that's a societal thing, and I think that's something that it's weird. If you look at younger generations, I'm not sure they have it anywhere near as pronounced as they did. When I visit my schools in my constituency now, I feel it's very different. If I look at the generation of staffers in Parliament, that I used to be a staffer in Parliament, I think they're very different. I think there's been a real evolution of what being a 21st century man is, for lack of a better phrase. But undoubtedly there are pockets of it, and I think it used to be sort of schools and sports were where it was the worst. I think schools have done, a lot of schools have done a really good job of evolving that. But it's also, there are moments when you see a group of lads and you think, you know where this is going. But for the most part, I think generationally there has been a huge shift. Final question. You were one of the Conservative MPs at the Carlton Club, that's the Central London Members Club. You had to intervene in a very serious situation involving the former Deputy Chief Whip, Chris Pincher. That night arguably sealed Boris Johnson's fate as Prime Minister. Can you tell me what happened that night? I have a lifelong habit of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I'm not able to say very much. Yes, I was there. I am a witness to an investigation that is ongoing, and therefore I don't want to prejudice that investigation at all. And so I can't say much more than that, really. Fair enough. Any idea when it will conclude? I would hope sooner rather than later, but I can't say for certain. Thank you for talking to me. I expected it to be a great interview. I think it takes courage, but it's courage for a purpose. And I think that purpose is a really noble one. I'm sorry for what you and your mum endured, but hopefully your words will prevent other children and women going through the same. Mark Fletcher, thank you. Coming up, Conservative MP Peter Gibson.
If I take us back to pre-2005, gay people couldn't even enter into a civil partnership. So we've come on an awful long journey, and I think the church is on that journey too, but at a much slower pace.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Peter Gibson, Conservative MP for Darlington, elected at that last election. Your mum was an NHS midwife. Your dad worked as a shipwright at Smith's Dock. You grew up in the North East. Were you always sure you were a Conservative?
Well, I'm from the North East, born, raised, educated, ran my business in the North East, deeply, deeply passionate about everything to do with the North East. And that was my motivation for getting involved in politics. I felt that the North East had a great deal to offer, but I came from the land of Mandelson, Morlham, Milburn. And when I look around the North East and I look for those signs of what they'd actually brought to our region, they're very sadly lacking. And that was my motivation for getting involved in politics. Family friends stood for the council when I was 10, and I got involved delivering leaflets, number catching at polling stations, and kind of got the bug. Visited Parliament when I was 16, and that lifelong ambition fulfilled.
You entered into a civil partnership with your partner, Gareth Dad, in 2008.
Yeah.
Any plans to marry?
So Gareth and I have both been on a very long political journey together. We met at the Young Conservatives, and our civil partnership in 2008 was a fantastic celebration with friends from around the country, many friends inside the Conservative Party. Our respective witnesses at the time were my mum and his mum. Sadly, my mum's no longer with us, and we've always had the ambition that one day we will convert our civil partnership into a marriage, and it's just finding the right time in our own lives to do that. And so the discussion that's been going on in respect of what the Church of England is doing or considering doing has been quite relevant to us.
You're a Christian?
Yes. I'm a Roman Catholic, raised a Roman Catholic. Gareth's a confirmed member of the Church of England.
And you have criticised the Church of England's continued refusal to hold same-sex marriages. You said the Church's two-tier system on relationships labels gay people as second-class citizens. Tell me why this is something that you're campaigning on.
Well, the discussion that the Church was having with regards to allowing same-sex marriage to happen in England contrasts with the situation in Wales and in Scotland, where those things are able to happen. And you just have to look at how the Church treats its own clergy in respect of civil partnerships and gay marriages and the advice that it gives to them. So this is about equality and fairness and trying to eliminate those discrepancies in its stance.
How are you going to do that?
Well, we continue to raise the issue in Parliament, and fundamentally the law is such that at this point in time there is a bar in the legislation that prevents the Church of England from conducting those. So Parliament could actually pass legislation to remove that bar, putting the responsibility firmly back in the Synod's camp. But I welcome the fact that the blessings are now going to start happening. We're on a journey. If I take us back to pre-2005, gay people couldn't even enter into a civil partnership. So we've come on an awful long journey, and I think the Church is on that journey too, but at a much slower pace.
Do you think Parliament should legislate?
I think Parliament should remove any barriers that exist in law to the Church being able to do it. I think it's a decision for the Church,
Right.
but I think legislation that exists in Parliament that prevents them from doing it should be removed.
Something else you're campaigning on is to press the government to ban conversion therapy. Just explain what conversion therapy is.
Well, conversion therapy takes a number of forms in different parts of the world. There's been some studies done. Some countries have already legislated for it. And what it is basically a system of coercion and control. I call it abuse, basically trying to tell gay people, convert gay people from being gay into being heterosexual.
And also people who are transgender to not being transgender.
Yeah.
Why is this campaign important to you?
This, to me, is about the freedom of an individual to be who they are, and the mistruth, the lie that somebody can be converted from something that they already are. I intrinsically know that I'm a gay man, and the thought of being subjected to some treatment that would change me is just utterly crackers. It cannot be done. And so I think that abuse, and when you read those stories of coercion and control, be it in a religious setting, a medical setting, or indeed in a family setting, it's something that I really passionately believe that we should do so. We've done a whole host of things about protecting individuals, women and girls, upskirting, female genital mutilation, domestic abuse. To my mind, banning conversion therapy sits fully within that scope of those protections that Parliament brings in to look after people.
When did you realise you were gay?
That's a really difficult question. I think you know, as a teenager, you grow up and you feel that you're different. You feel that you're the only one. I think the world is very different now, you know, from being a teenager when I was in the late 80s, early 1990s. So I didn't actually come out until I was 21. So it's quite late compared to people who come out now much, much earlier. I was at an event last night and I met a guy who was 57 and he'd only come out 5 years ago. He'd waited till he was 52. And that's just the scale of the change that we've been on as a society. And I want everybody to be able to be themselves and be open.
Some accuse the government of dragging their feet. They say that they're going to ban conversion therapy. They haven't. Do you think the criticisms of the government dragging their feet are fair?
Well, I think we need to sort of segregate out who's doing what at what stages, and I think it's been a difficult journey. You know, being involved in politics, you see things on the inside as well as the public perception, and I think if I was sitting on the outside, I'd say nothing's happened, nothing's changed, when's it happening. I know from the work that I've done, people like Elliot Colburn and Alicia Cairns, and the work that we've done engaging with ministers and raising this at every level, that work is ongoing. It's not an easy thing to do. If it was easy, we would have done it, but it's a complex issue, and I think it gets mixed up with the whole discussion about trans rights as well, and I think that confuses the picture about what conversion therapy or conversion practices ban is all about.
The Education Secretary Michelle Donnellan said earlier this year that the government will now carry out work to ensure any new laws do not, I quote, inadvertently criminalise parents or clinicians having legitimate conversations with young people who are experiencing distress because of their gender identity. Does that sound any alarm bells to you?
No, not particularly. I don't want a situation where people are forced down one route or another, and I think it's perfectly right and appropriate for, if we take the issue of a trans person, having a legitimate exploration in a medical setting about what is absolutely appropriate for them is absolutely right. But conversion practices are about a predetermined outcome. Having a legitimate conversation about whether you are gay or trans, exploring your sexuality and your gender identity is a perfectly valid thing for a family or a medical practitioner to have. So that doesn't ring any particular alarm bells to me. This is really complex, and we've got to get it right, and we've got to protect people. But we've got to protect people from being forced one way or the other. It's about their self-determination.
Do you think a law to ban conversion therapy will be on the books, if you like, by the time of the next election?
I very much hope so.
And just to, you refer to the trans debate and that this can sometimes get tied up in a toxic debate. How do you detoxify that trans debate? Should we be trying to detoxify the debate on trans people?
I think Twitter's a very unhelpful forum for having a very nuanced intellectual debate about things. When I meet trans people and I hear their stories, I have nothing but sympathy and empathy for the immense challenges that they face in life. Far greater, I believe, than the challenges that I faced as a gay man. And when I talk to women who have challenges about this discussion, they come across to me as being genuinely sympathetic and understanding, but it's how we square those two circles and how we deal with those issues about at what age it's right for people to undergo the transition.
Do you have a view on that?
I'm open to discussion in respect of it. I think we have, the press and the media, I think, inflame the discussion about issues inside our prisons and women's refuges and changing rooms, all of which I think can be adequately dealt with and resolved.
Although we've just had a very bad case in a prison.
We have. But it's highlighted the debate, I think, and certainly the British government's been clear that they will deal with that based on birth gender and risk-based assessment, which I think is the appropriate thing to do.
Covered a lot of ground, and I've really enjoyed meeting you.
I've enjoyed meeting you. Yeah.
Thank you, Peter Gibson. Thanks for watching. Join me again next Sunday at 6.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. We will see rain or showers over the next few days, increasing winds, particularly in the west. Temperatures around average for the time of year. Looking at the bigger picture, Sunday's high-pressure system moves out the way only to be replaced by low-pressure systems, which means outbreaks of rain and stronger winds. The winds really picking up by the middle of the week. Large waves around western coasts and rainfall totals building too. This evening, we've already got outbreaks of rain moving eastwards across Northern Ireland, parts of Scotland, northern England, which could be heavy at times, particularly over the higher grounds. Some localised flooding is possible. Cloud increasing across the rest of England and Wales. Some damp weather here too. Under any clear skies across the far north of Scotland, Perhaps a touch of frost for 1 or 2 to begin Monday morning. But for most, a cloudy, damp start to the day. Again, this band of rain giving some heavier spells over the higher ground as it slowly pushes north and eastwards. Further rain also pushing in across southern parts of England and Wales through the day, which could be heavy at times. In between these weather systems, we could get a few glimmers of sunshine, particularly across central areas, and here temperatures reaching 14 or 15 degrees. Just a little bit cooler across the far north of Scotland, but some sunny spells here. Into the evening time on Monday, further bands of rain push north and eastwards, which could be heavy at times. The winds start to pick up across southwestern areas around the coast. The rain could be heavy at times as we move into the early hours too. Again, over the higher ground of northern England could lead to some localised flooding, perhaps southern parts of Scotland too. Perhaps drier towards the end of Monday night into Tuesday morning, but very mild temperatures, 9 or 10 Celsius to start Tuesday. But a cloudy start for many. However, we will start to see some bright spells pushing into parts of Northern Ireland, southwestern parts of England and Wales as we go through the day as this showery rain slowly pushes north-eastwards. The rain holding on across north-east Scotland and temperatures generally again around average for the time of year, but further wet and windy weather to come towards midweek.
On Mark Dolan tonight, following Wednesday's budget, you can debate tax cuts all you like. The elephant in the room is that Britain lives beyond its means. In my take at 10, the toxic legacy of the SNP is collapsing like a house of cards. My Mark Meets guest is Tony Blair's former flatmate and ex-Justice Secretary Lord Charlie Faulkner. Plus, Anne Widdecombe, Edwina Currie and the finest political commentators in the country reacting to tomorrow's papers. A busy show. We're live at 9.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.